I'm Professor Tony Diaz at Librotraficante. This is Nuestra Palabra, Latinos having their say. We are with the poet of the week, Stalina Villarreal. Here we're going to talk about the guts of her book, Watcha. Stalina, tell us about the pages, the contents of your book.
Well, it's 126 pages long with all the front and back matter. And I have 27 poems, 9 pieces of flash nonfiction, and 9 photographs.
And although it's not sectioned off this way, the photographs set the tone for different sections.
Yes, I organized the sections based on the photographs, and each photograph made me think of ideas to sort of chunk things together and organize them.
And right now we're kind of given a very direct description of the book because once people get into it, it is very complex because you're dealing with ekphrasis art, which is art about art. Tell us a little more about that and its role in the book.
Yeah, so because I used to be a visual artist, I was just naturally drawn to visual art. And actually, Watcha first started with an art history trip that I took to Mexico City. And I wrote about artwork in Mexico first, and that was initially part of the book. But I ended up taking that part out because I wanted the book to be focused on US Latinx artists. And also because many of the Latinx artists I wrote about were not Mexican origin, and so I wanted Watcha to be more cohesive. And so I started to write about strictly exhibits that I went to in the US.
And it seems as if then each section had a work of visual art that then inspired some of the poems. Tell us some of the topics, because immigration plays a big role in that.
Right, so I wrote about immigration, I wrote about activism, I also wrote about death, and I wrote about place, portraiture, self-portraiture, and I wrote a little bit about my own history and how my relationship to art is as well.
And it is a very universal work, really, really great aesthetics, powerful form, but also very, very easy to embrace down home. What I like is it is a very Houston story, even though tiene mucho corazón de Mexico, very Latinx story. Name some of the visual artists who you talk about.
Well, I wrote about a lot of Houston artists first. So the cover artist is I wrote about as well. And so their name is Jorge Galvan Flores. And I also wrote...
Tell us the name of the artwork.
The artwork is Alcanzanilla. Mm-hmm. And I also wrote about different artworks that I saw, and I don't remember all their names, but I saw an installation by our very own Stephanie St. Sanchez. I saw some posters by Mónica Villarreal. I saw...
And they're part of the Librotraficante, Nuestra Palabra Familia, which really is wonderful to bring all that together.
Yes.
And you're also Librotraficante, I want to add.
Yes. And so I wanted to write about, not just because they were homies, but also because their artwork really spoke to me. Mm-hmm. And then I also wanted to contextualize them with the broader Latinx experience. And so I wrote about some people who have more representation in terms of galleries and so forth. So I wanted there to be a broad range of artists. And so I went to different cities to look at exhibits. I went to Los Angeles to see an Afro-Latinx exhibit. I went to Santa Fe to look at an exhibit of artists who were both Native and Latinx reconciling one another and collaborating. And I looked at an exhibit about sci-fi that was in New York City. But most of the work that I wrote about is Houston-based or based in Texas, because during that time period, there were exhibits of regional artists from Texas. So for example, I wrote about Celeste de Luna, who's based in San Antonio. And so I wrote about the work that spoke to me the most.
And I really appreciate you being very clinical about the work, because I think some folks who are not familiar with poetry might think it's very, very advanced, but then you've got elitists that think our culture doesn't reach that level. They're both wrong, and we can ease them into it. And we're being clinical, but hay mucho corazón in this book. In closing, you write a lot about topics that are very tough, and you're very honest and vulnerable. You write about your grandfather kicking you out. He's actually kind of the star of the book in some ways. It sounded like that hurt. Why would you make him a star now?
Because, so I do partially think about how I write in the Chicanx tradition of writing about my familia and my ancestry. And I know that there's a tradition of writing about your grandparents, but I felt that my experience was different because I didn't have a loving experience in the sense that I was kicked out several times. And my grandfather is someone whom I really loved, and my abuelita protected us from him because he was a difficult personality. We just didn't know until she passed away. And so I wanted to write about my relationship with him because he was still a big part of my life, even though it was a difficult road that we took together.
And it is very healing and beautiful. And I think it's another testament to how only art can save us. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.